but this will be on Schoology. In the end, you're going to have your rivets in your final piece. So in my example, you can kind of see the little dots that are poking out. Those are my rivets. So if you're like fully forgetting what a rivet is from level 1, it's essentially a nail that's going through your 2 layers. Now, a lot of you are doing something similar to what I have, where you have like just 2 layers with negative space cut out from the top. So however many layers you're doing, it might not be a bad idea to practice with that many layers on scrap, but just make sure you at least have 2. If you don't practice with exactly, at least have 2. So this is the one I did this morning. I did it through my 2 circles here, and then I left it a little loose so I've got some mobility there. But if I have multiple rivets like on this one, because there's multiple points anchoring that together with my rivets, I won't be able to spin that and turn it once it has more than 1 rivet. And then the rivet size depends on your wire that you pick. For your practice at least, I would recommend doing a thicker wire because thinner is going to fight you in a lot more ways. And I'm working with 14 gauge wire. I put my spool away, but it set it on the spool. You'll need to know your gauge. So if it's not labeled on the spool like what I had, you can use the gauge measuring tool. This guy lives in the measuring tools drawer. You can find whichever slot it fits in most tightly. And remember, it's not about this circle, it's about the entry slot. And so mine for 14 barely fits in here, but it does. Whereas for 15, I can't get it in at all. So this just confirms what I already knew on my spool. You don't have to do that if you have the spool that's labeled. And then to start with this, I'm gonna be hammering my wire straight from the top. So I need to harden this. And whenever we've talked about hardening, we're usually like hammering in a texture and it's sheet metal, so it's flat. I need to keep this round. So what I'm gonna do is to harden it, I'm gonna push out any bends in this so it's most of the way straight. And then I'm gonna use either another steel block on top, or I have this anvil that you've probably wondered why we have. And I'm gonna roll this like a coil of clay. So I'm just gonna go up and down. If you choose to work with a thinner wire, you have to do this a bit more. But what you're looking for is getting this work hardened to the point where it's not bending as easily. And right now I can't really bend mine very easily. So I'm good with that. The thick wire makes it a little faster. And then I'm gonna set up a vise clamp. These guys are in a box. Mr. Young had borrowed them, but now we've got them all back. They're in a box and they are right behind Emma's spot by the metal cutter on that little side table. And then what I'm gonna do, I'll turn this guy sideways so you guys can see what's happening more, is I'm gonna put my wire in this clamp. I would recommend cutting a piece of wire about this long, because if you have multiple rivets, you only have to work hard in this one piece and you can keep cutting rivets from this piece the whole time. It just saves you work. So I've got my wire barely sticking out of my vise clamp here. And whenever I cut it with our pliers, it pinches it, so it has a little bit of a point at the top, and I need this to flatten out. So I'm gonna take a flat file. Remember, forward only with these flat files. I usually go from different sides in case I'm slanting it accidentally. This way I can get it really flattened out where I want it. And then to make my rivet head, what I'm gonna do is use our rivet hammer. So maybe you used this in like special cases in level 1, but when you're using the rivet hammer, you start with the narrow side and you hit your wire in an X pattern. So I'm gonna hit this just gently. And then what I'm starting to see is probably not great to see on this camera, but I'm starting to see a tiny bit of like a widening at the top of my wire, and that's the start of my rivet. And then when I put this through my metal, I need to drill a hole that is the exact same size as my wire. So the chart that you guys got, this crazy thing, has all of the gauges and all of the drill bits so you can find which one matches. You should just keep this in your box, but if you lose your copy, there's one that hangs by the drill 24/7. And on the left column is my gauge. Remember that the lower the number, the thicker your wire. And then the drill bits are all the way on the right. Same thing, lower the number, bigger the drill bit. So I highlighted mine earlier. I have gauge 14. I'm going to zoom in a bit because my projector's not great. So I have gauge 14, and that is a size 51 drill bit. In our setup at the drill table, there's the cup that says new bits, and you can see this one's a 61. They have the number for the drill bit size. What I'm going to recommend is just take 2 of the size that you're working with, keep them in your box if you can be trusted to return them. Because if we just all take them to our boxes and never return them, we're going to have to order more. But for the time being, that way you're not constantly searching for them. If you want to keep them temporarily in your box, like you could tape them to the underside of your lid. That way they're easy to find. But that way you just have them on hand for what you need. So this is all in the new bits cup. Ones don't really use that. That's really just there for you guys. So I, on my chart, found that I need a size 51 drill bit. If I don't have a 51, I could work with like 50, 52. Something close to it is good enough. And the reason I need it to be that exact size is because if I have a giant drill hole through my metal, my wire is going to want to fall sideways when I go to rivet this. And I actually already pre-drilled mine, so I'll show you. This wobbles a little, but not much. So this fits through, and I'm going to check my rivet head and see if it stops my wire from going all the way through. I'm going to put it in my vise clamp. Oops, I'm going the wrong way. Because it's actually so snug that I can't hit it through. There we go. And then I just tapped that through the rest of the way. And then that is my first part of my rivet. It stopped from going through my nickel there, and it's not going to fall off now. Now, if I'm layering multiple pieces, what I would typically do is, let's say I needed these to be perfectly aligned. I drill my hole in my top layer, I make sure my wire fits, I set it on top of my bottom layer, and I mark through that drill hole with a Sharpie where I need to drill. Because sometimes if you stack your pieces and you try to drill them at the same time, they move. And if it's got a hole that's not in the right spot, you're not going to be able to work around that. You'll need to recut, and it's really annoying. So I would recommend doing your first rivet. Like on the tester, we work out the kinks. But in your final one, I would do your first rivet for the whole piece before drilling the rest of your holes. Because if that rivet's anchoring them together, then you can go through and just drill both layers for the rest of them. And I forgot to mention, the drill becomes kind of a line situation because we're all drilling. You can drill with the flex shaft, and then as long as it's on forward and you have a piece of wood that's underneath your metal, we can drill back here too. And that way you guys don't have to wait as long. I also set up by the vise clamps another little miniature drill, and in the next few days I'll show you guys how to use that one, and that way we've got lots of options that you don't have to wait for. Okay, so I've got my piece of brass. You know just as well as anyone that when I drill, I've got this little like flare out of metal here, and that's going to keep my pieces from sitting right next to each other. So I'm going to file that flat to get it out of the way, if I can hold this. Remember with the files, try as best you can. I'm going to do this on my bench pin off screen real quick. Try as best you can to go forward only with them, because if you go backwards, like if I lead with the handle, I'm actually flattening out the file teeth, and it's not going to work as well in the future. Okay, so I've got that file down enough. It's still a little bumpy. Ideally, I would do that a bit more. I'm going to slide this one on. If when you file or if when you first drill it's kind of snug, like mine's a little bit snug right now, you could take a round file inside your drill hole and loosen that up a little. But this one fits. And then I'm going to work on top of my steel block again to finish this off. And I'm having trouble getting these guys together, so I'm just going to put them back in the vise clamp to kind of tap them down. And that way the wire can be out of my way hanging there. And then these are just random scraps. When you guys are doing your testers, everyone in my morning class thought we needed to cut out circles like I did. They can just be small little scraps from a recycling. They don't need to be pretty. You can do the same rivets, like 2 rivets on the same piece if you want, but I just want you to practice it before you get to your final. And then from here, let me move my vise clamp out of the way. I'm going to cut my wire down and basically just repeat my steps. So when I cut my wire down, how much length I need hanging out of this is about 1 millimeter. So what I have kind of between my piece of brass and my pliers right now is what I want. And then I repeat the steps of, I file again. I find my file, I think I put it away. I file that flat. Try to get a good hold on it. And then, there we go. And then from there, I use my rivet hammer again, and I work at that X pattern. This is the part where I see people mess their project up because they hold their hammer ever so slightly crooked and then they put a bunch of dents in their metal. So when you're doing this on your practice ones, just try to take it slow and be really precise so you're just hitting your wire rather than the metal that's next to it. And then I'm going to hammer this way. And that X hammering is what flares it. But then when you're done with the X hammering, you can flip it to the round side of the hammer. And that's just basically what finishes flattening it. So then now, this is a weird little random piece that I made, but I've got my two pieces riveted together here. So for you all, what I'm looking for is in the end, you could give me something that looks like this, where you've done two rivets. They could even be in the same piece. Like you could do another one right here in the same piece going through both layers, and that'd be fine. I'm giving you a completion grade for these because if you mess up on these, I'd rather you mess up on these than on your final project. So what I'm thinking is you can hand these in by Friday at the latest. If you're having a hell of a time with it and they're all a hot mess, we can figure it out before you rivet your actual project. And then if you're doing great with it, awesome, then you're set up for it. But for you all, the sheet that I gave you, the one I showed you, this is reference for you with drill bit and gauge matching size. The other one that you got is everything, and I forgot I'm still recording. Let me stop this.